listening to tales of a man named Bunny who was a hero in the RAF. "Why did you call him Bunny?" Dell asked a grieving relative. "Well, that's what they called him in the RAF, didn't they? Because his surname was Warren." Dell froze. He looked at the coffin. He looked at the headstone. He looked at the mourning family who were definitely not the Warrens he knew. "Who?" Dell whispered, his face turning the color of his beige coat. "We're at the wrong funeral." They had spent an hour mourning a complete stranger. It was the kind of moment that would have made Albert roar with laughter, or perhaps start a story about the time he buried a Commodore in the wrong hemisphere during the war. Chapter 5: The Gold Rush. Back in the present, the weight of the inland revenue hung over them like a guillotine. 48,750 for pounds. That was the magic number, plus interest. It was a figure that seemed designed to keep them in the concrete canyons of Peckham forever. "So, what are we going to do, then, Dad?" Damien asked, his young face mirroring his father's stubbornness. "I suppose you could always look for a job," Raquel suggested gently. "Trigger said they're recruiting down at his depot. Road sweeping." The thought of Rodney the man with to GC East bushing a broom was too much for Dell. "I'm a trader, ain't I?" Dell declared, his eyes catching the light of the flickering television. "I've been trading all my life. I could sell rice to the Chinese." He had a plan. He was going to become the manager of a new firm. Since he was disqualified from running a company, he would make Rodney the managing director. Rodney Trotter, Dell beamed, the new face of Trotter's Independent Traders. "You'll be in charge of sales, purchasing, and finance. I'll just be the consultant." But the debt remained. And then the flickering screen provided an answer. Gold Rush, the fastest game show on TV, hosted by Jonathan Ross. "I'm going to apply," Dell said. Rodney laughed. "Dell, last night one of the questions was who introduced the potato to England, and you said King Edward." "I didn't hear the question properly," Dell snapped. "But he did it. He got on." The night of the show was a fever dream. The lights were too bright, and Jonathan Ross's suit was even more expensive than Justin's. Dell stood there, representing fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. He sailed through the first round by pure luck. Kilimanjaro. Yes, because Fuji made cameras. He was moving up the Rainbow Road. Then came the moment, the 50,000 pounds question, the penalty question that could save him or sink him. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Dell's mind went blank. He used his SOS. He called Rodney. Back in the flat, Rodney and Cassandra were dressed as a policewoman and a gladiator, an attempt at fantasy therapy that had gone horribly awry when Dell unexpectedly stayed home. When the phone rang and Jonathan Ross's voice came through, Rodney thought it was Mickey Pierce winding him up. "Oh, piss off, Mickey, you're getting on my tits now," Rodney shouted. But it was real. "Rodney, help me." Dole's voice pleaded through the speaker the guitar question: Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Rodney, with the confidence of a man who had once heard a record in a library, answered, "Ravel, 100% Del." "Ravel," Del shouted to the nation. "Derek," Jonathan Ross said, a look of genuine pity on his face. That was the wrong answer. It was Segovia. Dole's heart didn't just break, it imploded. He had lost. He had lost the money, the flat, and his dignity on national television. Chapter 6: The Phone Call of Destiny. Back at the flat, the mood was funeral quiet. Del was missing, having disappeared into the night. When he finally returned, he looked older, tired. The vibrant, larger-than-life character seemed to have been hollowed out. "I could have sworn it was Ravel," Rodney muttered, looking at his feet. "Everyone knows Ravel makes shoes." Del exploded, though there was no real heat in it. It was a trick question, and you fell for it. They sat in the dim light of the living room, the reality of bankruptcy settling in. They were back at the bottom, but they together. Then the phone rang. "Hello," Rodney answered. "Yes, can I ask who's calling?" He handed the phone to Del. "It's the producer of Gold Rush." Del took the phone, his face hardening. "I bet it's about that podium. I bet someone's damaged it. Probably Jonathan Ross tripped over his own ego." "Hello. Yes, this is Derek Trotter." Del listened. His eyes widened. His jaw dropped. His hand began to shake, and for a moment, Rodney thought he was having another hard turn. "What? No, no." He looked at the family, his face transforming from despair to a manic, golden joy. "He said there's been a mistake," Del whispered. "It was Ravel. The researcher got it wrong. I've won the £50,000. The room erupted. Cheers, hugs, the sound of champagne, or at least the promise of it, filled the air. "I knew I was right," Del shouted, his voice regaining its Peckham swagger. "Give the money to charity. Pull the other one. It's got bells on. We're the Trotters, and we're back." Chapter 7: The Nag's Head Jubilation. The news of Del Boy's windfall spread through Peckham faster than a cheap suit in a rainstorm. By the time the Trotters arrived at the Nag's Head, the pub was already buzzing. Sid, the stand-in landlord while Mike was away, had already lined up a row of glasses. Trigger was there, looking at a pint as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Boyke and Marlene were in their usual corner, Boyke looking particularly smug as he adjusted his silk tie. "I hear you've come into a bit of official money, Del," Boyke drawled, his laugh sounding like a machine gun in a library. "50 grand. Hardly enough for a decent cigar, but for you, it must feel like the crown jewels." "Jealousy is a terrible thing, Boyke," Del shot back, slamming a stack of notes onto the bar. A round for